Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Midnight Mass, episode 4. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I'm going to throw it out there. I think it's so funny, the interesting timing, because I've said this about something else in correlation with, like, Midnight Mass, and now I'm kind of saying it again in correlation to something else, but I won't spoil what it is. But it's just a statement of, I wasn't expecting this to be a vampire story. That's like the rub, because I kept being like, this seems more like a vampire rather than a freaking angel, but like, I don't, every interpretations and stuff like that. But I felt so stupid and it took me so long to figure out like how the miracles were happening. So first and foremost, he kept saying like, oh, I can feel it in them, blah, 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 blah. I'm so stupid. It wasn't until like partway to the episode. It's not till he was visiting Mildred, because the situation with Aaron's baby, which we'll get to, like the blood vial, like it's in the light, it's busting. I'm like, well, how would the blood be? I was like, it's not making any sense. And I was like, you stupid idiot, the communion. Everyone who and that's going to be the thing. Everyone who hasn't been sipping the literal and metaphorical Kool-Aid are as good as done. Is what it's kind of set up to be. I think. Like if you haven't been sipping the Kool-Aid, you're done because you're not as entranced in all of this. I think it adds a level of like you getting swept up in it to a certain extent. But I'm like, right? Everyone's been sipping on the communion, like. Lisa, for example, so like that's how she was able to get the strength back, because vampire blood has like healing properties. I mean, it literally rejuvenated Father Pruitt, but and another thing I'd completely forgotten about that kind of fits with what I was saying, like, oh, like of course, like when I was like, right, it makes sense because Pruitt was like so tender to her. I forgot, and when she runs into him later on, she's like, John. I was like, right. The first time, like, he was doing mass for her, she said John, and it's like, no, this Monsignor Pruitt is elsewhere. This is Father Paul. It's like, the signs were always there. Oh my, it's just like, but like the communion thing, I felt so stupid for not realizing it. It's like, it's been staring you in the ass, because it's just the blood in the vial bursting, because I was like, I didn't know where that was coming from until like I said, until he was giving Mildred communion, and I was like, that's what's happening. That's why everyone's kind of getting better, why Annie's eyesight's getting better, why Ed's back is getting better, because it has healing properties. But obviously we start with like him not being well, and it's just kind of like you had that Sturge and Dolly, as well as the mayor, all Wade, not like too, like they were kind of like freaked out by what they saw, and especially because they do piece it together of like they saw the picture and everything, her saying Monsignor, everything. I'm like, oh my god, that's Monsignor. That's Monsignor, but he's young again. Is like, what's going on here? So, but the moment Beverly comes to visit him and she wants to open up the blinds, he's like, no, it hurts my eyes. I was like, yo, are we going vampire here? It was like, that was the immediate thought. And especially when he wanted to eat the food, I was like, oh, I bet you don't want to eat the food. I bet you're looking for some tasty blood, aren't you? I was like, I just know it. And especially when he puts his hand out and starts burning, I was like, once again, I was like, I didn't realize we were going down the vampire route. That's so fascinating. And once again, it's like, I kind of already felt that inkling when you got introduced to the angel, but in general, I never would have expected it to be like this story to evolve to what it is, that it is like a vampire story. I wasn't expecting that. So that was kind of interesting. But obviously, like, it's starting to take a toll on him, because he ends up bringing it up to Beverly. Like, he feels like there's a shift inside him, because he's like, when I was younger, like, I felt the spiritual change in me, but he's like, nothing to this extent. And she's kind of like, yeah, it's good, because she's like, that's God moving through you. And, she's even saying like, oh, we should tell people who you really are because of the miracle of it. But he's like, yeah, in God's time. And she's like, yeah, but there's no other time but God's time. But it's like Beverly wants, like, it's like, I want people to, like, because she wants to make more of a big spectacle of it, because it's like, oh my God, look at the miracle that is Father Pruitt. What's become of him? He's so young and everything. So it's like she's trying to move things at her own pace, and he doesn't want to, because he did say it like last episode about like, right, he wanted to prepare them for the miracles that were to come. Like he wanted to build up to it, you know. He road to hell is paved with good intentions. Like, oh, I wanted to come back and save my congregation. I wanted to save this island. You know, there's been so much loss from this island. So many people left. This island is kind of hollowed out, and I want it to be filled yet again. I want it to be reborn. So you have that angle. But circling to, you know, Aaron's situation, it turns out like the moment like Sarah's doing the thing, and I'm like, I'm not hearing a heartbeat, and the way she's moving around and looking, it's like she can't. It's like, wait, what? I was like, oh man, I was like, don't tell, she miscarried. And then it's like, but then like, it's like, yeah, like, because it's like, but like for Aaron, it's like, no, like I haven't felt anything. Like there hasn't been anything to kind of imply like it is a that there has been a she's like, I've been feeling the baby and everything, but it's like, nothing felt like I had a miscarriage. Like, I don't fully know, like, the circumstances around a miscarriage. So, like, because I was like, because I think in my head, I'm confusing a stillbirth with a miscarriage. But I was like, you know, because there was something I was watching recently that had, well, it seemed like it was going to be a miscarriage situation because there was just so much blood. But it's like, because that's why I'm like, I don't know enough about like the anatomy of how that like what an actual miscarriage is, and like what like the signs of it are, like if they're, you know, because it's like she's thinking, because Sarah's thinking like, oh, like you're so like it was something like so traumatic, like you kind of blocked out the signs of like, yeah, you had a miscarriage, so you've been believing that the baby's been fine the entire time. But it's like, no, like she's like, there's no way I miscarried, because I feel like she was like, I would have known that. So it's like, right, you can go to Main Island. I could hook you up with a therapist that kind of help you through it, because she's thinking like, oh, you're blocking this out from a psychological standpoint. So it's like, but then I'm like, we don't get an answer in this, but it's like, what in that blood did that? Like, because she was pregnant beforehand, but it's just like for the pregnancy to kind of disappear. I guess. Now, maybe this is just me reaching, because the baby was so young. Maybe it's like the blood, like the blood. Well, I'm so stupid. The blood itself is a rewind on time. It rewinds the body, because later on she gets checked out by a mainline doctor being like, you were never pregnant. Like, you don't, it just, there are no signs. There's nothing in your body that says you had a miscarriage, but also like nothing ever shows that you were pregnant. Like the blood is a literal rewind of your body. So like why Ed's like, oh, on my back, it's like it made him younger again. Like his body rewound itself. Same thing for Annie. Same thing for Lisa. It's like it rewinds itself like prior to the wounds and the damage that was done. And not saying that the damage was done like her body getting pregnant, but it's like that was kind of it basically time traveled her body back to before she got pregnant. I was like, that's crazy, because I've never like known vampire blood to basically exist, like to operate in that way. But I've talked about this recently, like using like the Angel example from the TV show Angel, or in that Buffy the Vampire universe. I'm sure it happens in Buffy, it got brought up, but I definitely remember it getting brought up in Angel, that the moment they become, like a vampire becomes human, they start dying again. Like, for example, the example I use, like Darla. I think Darla had cancer before she became a vampire. Being a vampire put it on pause, but the moment she became human again, she started dying from cancer again. So, like, that's what that it does. Like, it kind of, like, it's not a one for one, but, like, it's just, like, it has, like, magical properties of, like, you know, halting things, but like rather than halting, it's rewinding. Like, dude, this is, I've just never known like vampire blood to be used in this regard of like explaining like that it could undo a pregnancy, because I guess from that body's perspective, it's just like, right, it's just like it is just purely rewinding time. Because I'm about to say like, not unless it's treating like the baby like and have normality in the body, because it's trying to return the body to an original state, probably a quote-unquote peak state, which I think is so interesting, because Erin was saying like, right, she like from God's kiss her daughter would grow up and be in her peak age and form and everything, and I'm like, interesting choice of words now that I've kind of thrown that out there. This episode was wild with all that. Like, it's just kind of like, oh my god, this stuff is just, it's kicking up. It's kicking up big time, dude, and that's wild. Because now, like, you know, Aaron's trying to make sense of it. It's like, did Sarah, like, it's like, no. It's not like it was a Sarah thing. It's like, no, I know I was pregnant. I heard that the baby's heartbeat. I've also, like, I found out I was pregnant before I even came back to the island. So it's not like it was a mistake on Sarah's part. But now it's like, right, like, hearing all that from the doctor being like, yeah, there's, like, no way that, like, that could happen. And then she was like, well, there's been a lot of miraculous stuff on the island. Could that be having some kind of effect? So she herself is going to start questioning a lot of that, I think, which sets up a lot of interesting things, which I'll kind of save till, like, we get to the end. But I find that so fascinating because even to the point that Pruitt is, like, cutting himself with the cross and he's drinking his blood, but it's like, it's satiating it a little bit, but it's like he needs, like, someone else's blood to, like, fully satiate his hunger. And so he ends up, like, going to visit Mildred, because obviously Mildred recognizes, like, oh my God, John, like, what happened to you? He's like, I know, it's a miracle. I got so much to tell you about, but, like, here's Mass, because he wants her to keep getting better. Because part of me is like, you don't, because Joe brings it up later on that, like, there was, like, word about, because it's like, oh, you look like you could be his son. And it's like, because there were rumors that Pruitt was kind of very, like, not promiscuous, but, like, yeah, like, he wasn't as celibate as a priest is supposed to be. So I was like, could it be implying that, like, Sarah is actually his daughter or something like that? Like, or at the very least, him and Mildred definitely had a past. Not necessarily that he's Sarah's dad, or, like, secretly her. Maybe that's always why he kept looking at her, because he actually is her dad, and maybe, like, that was kind of a big secret, like, kept between all of them, because it's like, right, finding out that, like, the Monsignor crossed the line. Well, he might not have been the Monsignor at the time, but, like, a man of the cloth, like, crossed the line like that. Like, it's bad enough, like, you're supposed to be celibate, but also, like, one of your congregation, you know, you guys, you did a classic tango. If I'm trying to say it in a very, like, non-crass way, I guess I could try to say, like, you know. So that's why I'm like, maybe that's why he was always eyeing Sarah up, because it's like, oh, Sarah, he knows that Sarah's his daughter. Maybe that's why he's also, like, he was, like, hemming it up when he was, like, thanking her, because it's like, right, you're my daughter, you've never known this entire time, like, you thought, like, the person you believed to be your dad, like, because we haven't covered that subject about her dad, so that's why I'm like, she definitely doesn't know that Pruitt is her dad, like, you know, so I'm like, I think that's what they're setting up in that regard, and, like, that would explain also their circumstances and stuff like that, so. Because what adds more validity to it is the moment she was like, what was my dad's name? And then like, she paused and almost like, huh? It's like, what was my dad's name? He's like, George. She had to think about it. She had to pause, because she had to be like, oh, right, you don't know about a John being your. That's why I'm like, she paused on it. Well, I'm like, that pause. Oh, you could cut the tension from that pause. Now having that in my mind of, like, now that explains a lot of that dynamic. You know, it explains a lot. You know, because I knew that scene had so many levels to it, of her being like, right, Paul's staring at me the same way Pruitt did, and now at first I was like, right, because he is Pruitt, so I was like, there is that level to it, but him being her biological dad adds an even extra layer to why he did it back when he was Pruitt, but even now it's Paul, because he's like, right, he's admiring her from afar without telling her who he really is, in both facets of, like, hey, I'm actually Monsieur Pruitt, I've just gotten younger, oh, but also on top of that, I've secretly been your father the entire time, you just didn't know it was a secret me and your mom kept, probably because it also would have meant, probably, like, that there might have been an affair situation going on. There's also the church thing of, like, right, having a baby out of wedlock, so maybe she found out she was pregnant and immediately married George, because they thought, like, whichever way they decide to handle that. So there's that lane and side of things. So there's that. But obviously there's a complicated thing of, like, oh, let's go to Mass and stuff like that when your priest can't leave the house and can't go out in sunlight. And then I start going, like, oh, so that's where the TV show's name comes from, Midnight Mass, because he needs to start holding Mass at night, because he can't visit anyone throughout the day, not unless he does, like, a, like, cover yourself from head to toe. I don't know if that's enough of, like, you know, because, like, you could skate around that in, like, it's still, like you go, like, the Vampire Diaries universe, that's not enough to stop you from burning. It helps mitigate it in, like, Preacher, you know, just, based on the TV show. I don't know if the same rules will necessarily apply in the comic in that regard when it came to Cassidy, because I kept trying to be like, Rudy? I was like, no, that's his character from Misfits. Joseph is like, no, that's Joseph Gilgun's name, the actor who plays him. But yeah, Cassidy. Regardless, tangents and all that aside, there's some other interesting developments over the course of the episode. The conversation between Ed and Riley was really interesting, because he brings up the fact is that, like, he held a lot of resentment towards Riley, because it's like he always kind of, it's almost like you almost look down upon all this stuff. It's like you took part in, like, I think he was like in all the stuff related to the island, the fisherman work and stuff like that. It always felt like you looked down upon it, and so he was a little resentful of that. You went off to the mainland, got yourself a good job, but like you never. It's like, oh, you just felt like maybe it was too much trouble to explain it to your dumb blue-collar dad. He's like, I tried to explain it, but like technology and all the internet stuff, like you never had any interest. He was like, that, and then also you add in all the stuff of like, right, what happened with Tara Beth. Because I've been just calling her like Tara before, but it's like Tara-Beth, so it's like Tara Beth. And it's like, when you add in that level of things, it just like made him resent him even more. But he's like, right, I apologize, because for him, he starts saying like, for you to have gone down like the path, like I might not agree with, like, but for you to have strayed so far away, it means a parent had to mess up, and your mom is a saint, so I know it wasn't her. So on some part, like, whatever I did to fail you, son, I apologize. I'm sorry. That's all I got to like really say about it. He's like, I do love you. I know it's not always the easiest thing to say, but like, I do love you. And so you see a look on Riley's face, or I think he needed to hear that. Like, it seemed like there was kind of a smirk, but I wasn't sure. But you also had him being there for Aaron, when having lost the baby, and the conversations, like, we get a little bit more explanations into like some of her issues with her mom. Like, we got some like the drinking and just like her mom being cruel. We got those conversations before, but now we kind of like learn more about that cruelty, because her mom would basically catch birds, like wanted to keep birds, and would immediately clip their wings so they couldn't get away. And it's like basically, yeah, baby, like everything gets its wings clipped at some point in time. And it's like, what about you, Mom? Did you get your wings clipped? She's like, yeah, the day you were born. I was like, Jesus. And she said that to her 7-year-old daughter. It's like, that's wild. And so for her, it's like, you know, and rather than letting her mom clip this bird's wing, she let it go free, and her mom proceeded to hit her. And it's like, from the drinking to the hitting to the being berated by her mom, it's like one thing was clear: I ruined my mom's life. And so, but for her, like, she went out. She left this town when she was 16. She was going to go out there, become an actress. And then she talks about the fact that she married her mom. Like, the guy she was married to would drink and be abusive. And she says, if it, like, Littlefoot, because whereas, like, I might have, in my mom's eye, I ruined her life, Littlefoot saved mine. Because if I hadn't found out I was pregnant, if I hadn't been a little sick, I would have stayed there, and I most likely would have died in that house. But it's like, Littlefoot saved her life. That's why she was so, like, and it's like, for her, that's the messed up thing of like, this baby saved my life, and I couldn't bring it into this world for circumstances that were outside her control, because there's other things going on at play here that she's not aware of. And so, with that being said, trying to figure that all out, and obviously, like, Riley opens up to her about his dream, the dream that he's had ever since he was in prison, where it's like, hey, I'm on that boat, and I'm like, if I could just go in any direction and just kind of like find my way to land. But he just kind of like drifts out there, and then like the sun rises, and then like that sort of dream ends. Which there's a level of like, oh man, like I was expecting, like, you know, not even jumping the gun. I thought like we were setting Riley's story up to be like, are we kind of like 30 Days of Nighting this a little bit? Like, if you've ever seen the movie 30 Days of Night, or if you've read the comic it's originally based on, Josh Hartnett's character, like how his story plays out. If you've ever seen that or read that, because I think that, I don't know how faithful of an adaptation. I remember reading up a little bit about the differences between a comic and a movie, but it's been years ago. But I want to say like the ending in the movie is how it ends in the comic as well. So if you know what the story, I don't want to spoil anything, but I thought we were getting something like that for Riley. I mean, I guess I don't think where things currently stand that's possible. We'll get to that later. But that's what I was thinking with that. And I was like, oh. And so for him, he's like, right, I'm stuck on this island. I'm never going to get off this island, which I'm like, man, in retrospect, is that like hitting home pretty damn hard. But he's telling her like she can do anything. She always could. They even have, she's even like, pray with me, and he does. Like, despite his situation where his beliefs currently lie, he prayed with her. It's not like I think you're naive or anything like that. They end up having a whole very interesting conversation about the afterlife, and obviously, like, I think this is this very distinct situations, like, comparing how an atheist probably viewed things from a very, like, logical standpoint of, like, what happens. Like, oh, when I die, just from speaking for myself, he basically talks about, like, right, your body functions one at a time, your brain, that basically it dumps all this DMT, and you're basically having the dream to end all dreams. Which I was like, how very, spoilers, Final Fantasy X of you, maybe you would be the dream that ends all our dreaming. It's just like, that a moment I heard that line, I was like, it made me think about Final Fantasy X, because I am the Final Fantasy nerd that I am. Because also, like I talked about it, Final Fantasy X is my favorite Final Fantasy. So, like, that will always resonate in my head. Just like, dream a little dream with me. Also, like, that song kind of, like, crossed in my head a little bit, too, during that scene. But for him, and there's actually, like, there's some, like, I don't know if nihilism would be, like, the right word. There's, like, some sad but yet beautiful like, there's sadness and pessimism to it. Like, oh, like, there's no, like, beautiful, glorious afterlife, but it's basically a mixture of, like, your dreams and your imagination basically kicking into overdrive. But there's also a beauty to it in its own right when he's talking about, like, right, like, all the, like, bacteria and all the things that make me up, except for, like, the parts of me that shut down, like, every bacteria and everything that's been on my skin, on this and that, goes off and basically, like, continues the cycle of, feeding into the plants, feeding into the animals. So it's like, he's like comparing it to like a star scattered, the stars scattered across the sky. Like, like, it's supposed to be like that. Like, I went from being this one thing to technically every part of me is now scattered across, like, into billions of pieces, like the thing. So, like, it's a little depressing to kind of, in certain regards, and, that all comes down to perspective of, like, right, there's no, like, grand, afterlife, but the perspective is, like, right, when you die, like, you're getting, like, just like a dream. Like, dreams are only, like, which is, it still baffles me, because, like, when you think about dreaming, it feels like you've been dreaming the entire time. Like, when I wake up, I'm like, oh, man, I just had that dream. It's like, no, I had that dream hours ago. You only dream for, like, a few minutes at a time. Like, your entire dreams, where it feels like the entire time you're sleeping, you're dreaming, it's like, I think, and once again, I could be ignorant, because I remember picking this up, but I think it is, like, you're only dreaming, like, for the first few minutes of your sleep, and then the rest, you're just, like, I think your brain's just in, like, full-blown rest mode. Like, so you're not dreaming the entire time, which is fascinating, because it feels like when you wake up, you're like, oh, man, because I always feel like, man, I just had that dream. It's like, that's why you also have to focus on it, because if you don't, like, it, like, slips through your fingers. Happens a lot with dreams for me, which I think is interesting, because even, because Riley can remember this aspect of his dream, but even, like, Aaron was like, yeah, I actually don't ever really remember my dreams, which I always think is kind of a fascinating thing in its own right. But regardless, like I said, I'm going in a whole tangent, but it's like, there is some, like, beautifulness in the grand scheme of things to, like, his perspective on things. But then you had Aaron's perspective of, like, right, it's just, God brought a little soul down here that was only supposed to be here for a little while, and just God, like, just like, no, I need you back by my side. And, like, there's some beautifulness to it. There's also sadness in that, like, response as well, because it's like, you just can't help but feel like it's messed up that, like, any life is cut that short. Like, I always feel that way. Like, you feel that in your soul, like, when you're just, like, when you find out, like, oh, this child that's of a certain age, like, oh, this child's only, like, a couple years old, and, like, they die. It's like, that's not, it doesn't feel right. It feels like the world should be fair. But also, that's where Riley struggles with things, because it's like, yeah, I hurt people. Because that was also the thing of, like, right, like, your memories and all that fades away. There's no pain, no memories of the fact is I've hurt someone, that I've killed someone, So that it kind of plays in that role of, like, right, I'm still here after, like, someone innocent ended up dying, But other than that, it's just like it's brought up, like, earlier, like, what Aaron's perspective of, like, right, that my baby's going to be in heaven, like, God's going to be there. It's like, yes, it's not like the wings and on clouds and stuff like that, but it's like being loved and not being alone. To her, like, that is heaven, that is God. It's like being surrounded by, like, oh, here's my father, or, like, here's my grandfather or my grandmother being there surrounding my baby, and they'll be the ones to give my baby a name and just let my baby know, like, I'll be there, we'll be reunited soon enough, that it's like, because it adds some meaning to like why we're here on this sad blue rock, essentially. And even Riley's whole perspective of being like, right, because he had the whole conversation about having a purpose. It's like in his perspective, he finally has a purpose, basically feeding the circle of life, the cycle of life of the plants and animals and stuff like that, and carrying on in that regard. So, and even Riley being like, I hope that is the case. I really hope that is the case of like your perspective on things end up being how it all works out. But even then, like Riley woke up at her place and he dreamed of he wasn't alone on the boat. She was too, which I'm like, what does that mean later on? We'll have to wait and see. Because I saw something that wasn't a spoiler necessarily. Like it was I won't say what it is, but a certain actor was like being interviewed because I'm subscribed to certain things on YouTube. And I didn't watch it, and it wasn't anything spoilerish, but it's like, oh, an actor's response to like, oh yeah, like this was my final scene in the show, like what my like I said, it didn't spoil anything. I was like, oh, but that's interesting, and now like it sends my brain in overdrive of now what the hell could that mean for this particular character? I won't even reference what character is, but it just kind of made me think about that, like where everyone else's stories kind of go in certain regards, like what their final scenes are going to be, the context of everything. So I'll leave it at that. But her deciding not to go to church, which I'm like, maybe that's the best thing, because that way, you know, is it like the Vampire Diaries continuity of like, right, it's not an issue after 24 hours because that's how long it takes for the blood to flush out of your system. Because you know, once again, if you've never seen anything in the Vampire Diaries universe, when a vampire, like, vampire blood can heal you in the same regard, but the moment you die with vampire blood in your system, you return as a vampire. That's how it works in that universe. So regardless, so you have all that. There are other pieces to this whole situation that the sacrament has run out. And so, which, once again, kind of in retrospect, I had this weird feeling when Warren walked in on him pouring out. I was like, I didn't say anything at the time. I was like, is that going to be his blood or something like that? Is that going to be like the secret ingredient? But I'm like, I let that whisk by. I didn't even bring it up during the review. It was like an afterthought I had. But I'm like, you stupid moron. You were already like trailing there. You didn't go all the way. You didn't go full throttle. You know, and I should have, and I probably would have pieced it together a little bit sooner. Whatever the case may be, it's just like I'm just feel so stupid for not picking up the signs that are clearly there. It's easy to recognize it now in retrospect, you know. But I wish I'd paid more attention to those details ahead of time. But like, yeah, he tries to drink what's left of the sacrament because like it's his body is aching because he's basically going through withdrawal, which is interesting because Joe's literally going through withdrawal because he's at the store, he sees all the alcohol, and the sheriff is like, "Yo, you know, my day's going fine, but is my night going to be an issue, Joe?" He's like, "How the fuck am I supposed to know?" He's just like, and he looks at the beer, he's like, "Fuck you," and he walks away. But the moment he shows up at Pruitt's place, I was like, no, I was like, Joe, get out of there. Don't stay around. Go. And he's just like, yeah, but Father, thanks. He's like, yeah, I'm sure you're busy and everything. And then he notices like, oh, like, you could definitely be Pruitt's son, but it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get out of here. I was like, good going, Joe. Good. And he Pruitt's like, no, wait. I was like, he's like, I'm so proud of you. And the moment he's holding his arms out, I was like, don't hug him, Joe. Joe, no. And then Joe gets hugged by him. He's just sniffing. And I was like, I expected him to go chomp, but he doesn't until later. The fact is that he accidentally like pushes, like Joe trying to push away from him, ends up slamming his head against the table and bleeds out. But then like, it's like, oh, are you okay? And it starts, sipping on the blood, even picking his head up, going full blown. I think because Raul Coley is in this, it just makes me immediately go like, oh yeah, full blown like zombie eating his brains, or like sucking the blood from the source like that. Then you have like the next day, everyone's waiting for him to show up at mass. Beverly goes to check on him and finds it. And the fact is that Beverly was like, okay. Well, we're going to get you out there. We're going to get you clean up and go out there. He's like, yeah, about that. And shows her his hand burn. He's like, okay. Don't worry. We got this. She brings in Wade and Sturge and have them dispose of the body, which Wade was like, no, but I mean, that was Joe. And then like, like, what the hell did you, and she slaps him. It's like, and basically like, once again, like, it was only a matter of, like, I knew it was coming. Like, Beverly was going to be, like, the leading factor in this. The moment we got introduced to that character, I was like, I know what that archetype is. I know who she's going to be in this show. And I was like, and she's filling that role to, I wasn't expecting that zero. I mean, like, she was always the one that's she had that in her, that 0 to 60, under some crazy circumstances like this, because like Wade has reservations, but for her it's like, the fact is she tries to justify it. Joe, terrible person. I'm like, come on, but he was trying to like do better. And the fact is that Pruitt isn't saying anything. I'm like, no, the man turned down a drink, he was doing better. Like, the fact is he's not saying that is because he, even later she's like, oh, do you feel any heaviness? And he was like, no. And she's like, that's because God worked through you. It's like, no, you should probably be thinking like, the fact is he doesn't feel bad about killing someone, but Beverly's trying to justify it because like, you bring so much good to this island, like it's a necessary sacrifice. It's like, right, God, Jesus, I didn't come here with peace. I came, like, I'm butchering it, but I didn't come here with peace. I came here with a sword. Like I said, I butchered that totally. But that's essentially like, right, like, angels are armed with weapons, so like that's what it is. Like, he's chosen by God, and God is acting through him and got rid of someone. It's like, it wasn't Ed, it wasn't your Lisa, it was this guy Joe. Like, the fact is he harmed you, like did what he did to Lisa. So it's like, it's almost like karma. This is God's rightful judgment. So like, he acted through Monsignor Pruitt, but that's the thing. The thing is that she is so willing to like not ask the question that should be asked of like what's going on, because it's not like the fact is he's burning from the sun. Shouldn't that make you go like, because that's also the thing of like, are we going like Walking Dead thing of like, because that's people's issues in certain regard when it comes to Walking Dead. It's like, so we're pretending like there isn't decades of pop culture stuff referencing zombies. We're going to pretend like, so it's like, you're not seeing like, oh, his skin burning, the blood. I'm like, oh, he might be a vampire. Vampires don't seem like they align with kind of like God, and that vampires and the undead in that regard like typically get associated with Satan and everything. So that's why I'm like, you're not seeing the key signs here, but it's like because of the miracles he's able to perform, that she's able to look past all that. Because I think it's more so like, right, I'm here, I'm the right hand to the person that God is acting through. It's like Beverly like will try to shift any narrative to fit whatever she needs it to fit. So that's why convinces Wade like, right, don't cherry pick what miracles you want, because it's like, right, if you don't like this, then how about give back the blessings your family got and your little girl can go back to that wheelchair, which I'm like, aren't you cherry picking? Like, I guess in actuality she's not. She's like, I'm accepting this as it is, the death and all, like it's all part of the package deal, so I accept it. So I guess she is being somewhat consistent, but she's also like big freaking hypocrite. So it's like, okay, there's that lane of things. And even later on, when Pruitt is sitting down with Riley, there's the whole conversation about like, once again, he's trying to justify it by being like, God, I'm blanking on all that he was saying, but basically he's trying to justify like, we might say like why, and it's not like there's just so much we don't understand. It's kind of not our reason to understand or something like that. And even Riley being like, on some level, I kind of understand it, but it's also like, that's him speaking from like what he's done recently. He's like, it's not my job to question through the Lord, but it's like, it kind of is under these circumstances, because you murdered a dude, a guy that was like, wouldn't God want you to let a guy who's on the path of redemption actually have a chance at redemption? Because she was also like trying to justify it by being like, all that, like, once again, like, all that has happened, like, the biblical stuff, turning people in cities to salt type of thing, like raising places to the ground. Like, once again, let's not forget how wild the Bible can get. Like, it's like, so like, don't get it twisted type of situation. So it's like, it fits in that regard. But it's like, oh, shouldn't we wait for Joe? It's like, no, Joe's not. Oh, don't tell me he backpedaled. It's like, no, he was good. He visited me the other day. He's very proud. And it's like, yeah, he went to the mainland to be with his sister. And that moment, Riley was like, what? And it's like, gotcha. I was like, you got caught in 4K, Pruitt. Because of course he wouldn't know that, because he's basing on most of his interactions with these people, like what he's known. Well, I was about to say like, yeah, because his sister died recently. It was like in the past like couple weeks that she died, most likely while Pruitt was gone. So like, he's basing all this information he has on people based on what he knew as Pruitt before he left, like now that he has a keener mind, but he slipped up because he didn't realize like, oh, like his sister is dead. So it's like, of course, and obviously Riley, like that's rolling through his mind while he's sitting at dinner. His mom's like, oh, like, I'm sorry about what happened. No. Oh, because like, Ollie was able to go to church. It's like they won't give you communion anyway, and it's like you're lucky you didn't, because that's going to be a whole complicated issue in itself. And once again, that's going to fall back on the sheriff and Ollie, like everyone that's not getting communion, because Joe got it, Riley's not drinking, and Aaron's not drinking, Sarah's not drinking it either. Like we know there's a few people who haven't been showing up to church drinking the communion, so that's going to be it. And I'm trying to think, like, has Beverly been drinking the communion? I don't think we've seen her. I don't think any of the Ultra Boys have either, have they? So I don't think Warren or Octor has. Once again, I could be mistaken. But other than that, like, you can tell it's like rolling through Riley's head about, like, because like his mom is like, oh, so many miracles have come to this island and stuff like that, and he's like, oh, we're good and should be thankful for what we have, and just like it's rubbing Riley the wrong way. And so when he's talking to his mom later on, she talked about the fact is that he always basically saw this island as, rather than a place that they lived, a place that they needed to get rescued from. But she's like, but this is where we live. And she's like, there's so much good happening here. But for Riley, it's like, Pruitt's a liar. Like, he lied to my face. He's like, Mom, I just want you to be careful. And like, the moment he's singing, I'm like, these sound like some final words. These sound like some final words. I was like, don't tell me we about to do this. We can't do this. I'm like, please don't do this. And he goes over to, Aaron's place, but before he even goes inside, he's like, his sister. I was like, no, Riley, don't go there, because the creature, which we do see, he's like wrapped up in the coat and the hat. Like, he is the one that's been running. Like, I guess maybe maybe he checks in on everyone that's getting some of his blood. Like, he gets something from that. Like, all of them connected on some hive mind level. Like, maybe that's what he gets from it. But obviously, like, it's like, because the entire time you had Pruitt being like, please, Angel, where are you? But now it's like he shows up, he's like, I need more sacrament. And the moment he's wrote, I was like, please be gone by the time Riley gets there. And then and Pruitt's like, oh. And then the creature turns around, I was like, and he gets Riley. I was like, shit. I wasn't like, this is a show where, yeah, I could see him dying. I didn't expect it to be like, we still got 3 episodes left of this, and he's already potentially dead. I think that's surefire dead. You know, Pruitt just comes over and closes the door and was like, now I think that symbolizes that dream he had. But once again, like, that's why I'm saying it fits the narrative. I think of everyone who hasn't drunk the communion, there's a bit target on their back now, and that's going to lead to some issues here and there. But that's also like why I'm like, that is representative of that dream he had, where it's like before it was him and he never got to see the sunrise. Like, oh, I'm going to be stuck on this island. He's literally going to die here. I mean, they already like Wade and Sturge like got rid of Joe's body, so are you going to do the same thing? But Beverly's going to justify if the time comes. It's like, right, he killed an innocent girl, you know, but like he had been trying to make amends, like, and that's the sad thing, he had never been able to fully make amends to everyone. But Andy's going to be asking like, oh yeah, what about she's definitely going to be asking like, oh, what about Riley? She's like, what? Like, Riley, he wouldn't come over to you. He's like, no, he never came over last night. Then things are going to start picking up even more. It's like, I just wasn't expecting that, because now I think we're shifting, because I would have thought, like, with the nature of the show, considering where we started, I think that's so fascinating, where you think it, to me, you would almost think that he was the main character of the show, like it's mainly through his perspective. Once again, maybe there's a possibility of somehow the creature doesn't kill him, but I'm sure it's going to drain him dry. But there's always a possibility that it could give him another shot like it did Pruitt. I mean, it bit Pruitt first, but then, like, maybe there's I don't know. Because if we, once again, spoilers a little bit, if Riley does come back next episode, like I said, I was kind of thinking like, oh, he's done, and that Aaron is going to be like the new main protagonist. And then it's like, well, what does that dream mean now in the grand scheme of things? It's like, there's so much that can be drawn from there with some statements and stuff. I'm like, my mind is going overload. Just thinking about all this, but like, if Riley does get a second chance, because there's certain, I feel like there's conversations that were in the trailer that I feel like we haven't gotten, that I'm like, is that something later? Like, because I thought there was stuff between Riley and Pruitt that we never got, but maybe we did, and I just didn't realize it. Conscious, I don't know. So I don't know whether Riley's dead or whether like Pruitt's going to try and convince the creature. It's like, no, let him get another shot, like make him a part of this, which that could be an issue in its own right, because Riley could end up being a monster as well, and that could lead to some issues between him and Aaron if that ends up being a kid. I don't know. Once again, I made some comparisons to some 30 Days of Night type of thing. So I've been talking for a very long time. I wasn't even trying to do that, but it's just like my brain went into overload with this episode. There's just so damn much that I felt like I had to talk about and just like share everything that was like flowing through my mind. So it's definitely going to be really interesting to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.